Freddy Krueger, the bastard son of 100 maniacs, a bona fide pop culture phenomenon and one of my earliest creative influences. I can't tell you when I first discovered Freddy Krueger because it would be like when you first heard about Santa Claus. I just grew up with him. Freddy's Nightmares was regular family, viewing when I was 4. A Nightmare on Elm Street has been such a creative influence on me that I have done 2 Elm Street-inspired photo shoots, promoted a Halloween party for a bar, and even named my son Craven. But where do the movies rank? What is my favorite? Which is the worst? Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Jeremy Campbell. I'm an author, a director, and a photographer. This is my story, Tales from the Creek Bed. The 2010 remake comes in last place. This movie does not have many, if any, fans, and I can't say that I am one of them. Enough has been said about this movie, so I will not pile on. To sum it up, it was one giant missed opportunity. Next up, it is a tough one. As much as I love A Nightmare on Elm Street, they have had some duds, but like a bad Metallica album, they have their moments and fans. But I will go with A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. It just feels lazy. The puns could be better, Freddy's makeup looks awful, and the story could be clearer. Don't get me wrong. Part 4 is not the most compelling story, but at least it is action-packed. Now, on a personal level, I do have some affection for this movie. When I was 13 and had just moved to a crappy little hick town called Cleburne, my mom gave me $50 for my birthday. I bought a handful of VHS horror movies from a local pawn shop, including this one, and like Metallica's Load Era, it was not the best, but at least it was something when I needed it. Next is Freddy's Dead, The Final Nightmare.
Every town has an Elm Street.
This movie is downright goofy, but at least it is entertaining. I like that Springwood is void of kids. That is amusing, even if it does not fit any timeline from any Elm Street movie. A few other pros to this movie are an original song by Iggy Pop, which helped introduce me to punk music, and the moment Freddy's daughter finds his gloves in the basement of his house. You get a real sense of how deep his depravity lies. This is a man who put a lot of thought into the devices he would use to kill. There's also a cameo from Alice Cooper, which is fun. I don't revisit Freddy's Dead often, but I will keep the channel the same if it is on AMC Fear Fest. Next up is the notorious Nightmare on Elm Street 2. As a kid, I did not realize there was such a strong homoerotic message in this film. I don't know how we missed it. The movie could have been much better if the filmmakers were aware of the subtext and made it a part of the plot. Freddy uses a young man's sexuality against him, but it was the 80s Reagan era, at the peak of AIDS, so I can see why this idea would not have gotten over. The big downfall of this movie is not the sexual undertones, but the slow pacing, the random scenes that go nowhere, and the inconsistent rules. There is just no rhyme or reason for hardly anything that happens. So why do I rank this movie above Freddy's Dead? You can switch them out. It really makes no difference. But there are some upsides to Elm Street 2. The opening bus scene is one of the best Elm Street moments ever. Like I said earlier, I was a horror fan at birth. When I was still a small kid, I would use my Fisher-Price school bus to recreate the opening of Elm Street 2. There is also the brain scene and the "You Are All My Kids" scene.
Freddy versus Jason.
Place your bets.
My next pick is Freddy vs. Jason. In 1995, my friend Donnie was the first to have home internet. The first thing we did, the first time we got online, was to confirm that Freddy vs. Jason was in development, and then send an email to New Line Cinema, expressing our concerns that they could potentially ruin both franchises if they did not handle the movie with the proper attention we believed they deserved. Looking for images of boobs would have been the obvious thing for boys our age to do now that we had access to the World Wide Web, but no. We were sending unsolicited fan suggestions to a movie studio. To our shock, we received a reply. It was simple. Thank you for your concerns. We will do our best. It would be 8 more years before we finally got the matchup from hell, and I was satisfied, at least on the Elm Street side of the movie. No offense to Ken Kinsner, but it should have been Kane Hodder as Jason. but Robert Englund was on par as Freddy, with plenty of great moments. I eventually saw Freddy vs. Jason 3 separate times in the theater and had a great time every time. Coming in at number 4 is A Nightmare on Elm Street. Part 4, The Dream Master. This one is near and dear to my heart. I first saw it when I was 5 after my grandmother rented it. I watched it, hit the rewind button, watched it again, and then watched it again. The behind-the-scenes story is that New Line was up against the 1988 writer's strike. They had a basic outline and a first draft, but not a real script. On top of that, they were already booked into theaters, so they had no choice but to deliver a completed film on time. Rennie Harlin was brought on as director to get the movie done fast. This was Rennie Harlin's third film. By now, he had proven that he could do exceptional work on less than a Canon film budget. No one can argue that it is not a great-looking film. The camera is always moving, the color palette is rich, it has a fantastic soundtrack, and the effects are outstanding. What it lacks in story, it makes up for in style. This next one was close for me, but I will go with Wes Craven's New Nightmare. I have always loved this movie and enjoy it more as I get older. It deals with real-life fears, the loss of a significant other, potentially losing a child, and questioning your sanity. I first saw this at the theater when I was 10 with my big sister and best friend, horror guru Donnie, and it was a blast. The theater was so packed that people were sitting in the aisles. I remember that being the most electric experience I had ever had in a theater up to that point. The crowd was screaming, jumping, and laughing, and they gave it a standing ovation afterward. I spent the day it was released on VHS at the video store, waiting for the staff to put it on the shelf. This was one of those video stores inside a grocery store back in the day, and my stepdad was the store's night manager, so they rented the R-rated horror film to a 10-year-old, no questions asked. I brought the movie home, and word instantly spread that I had it. It felt like every kid in my apartment complex was in my living room watching the movie. To me, Wes Craven's strength has always been ideas, which makes sense considering his roots are in philosophy and literature. The idea that evil can be captured in stories and held back from the real world is just the greatest. The way he weaves the theme throughout the movie with the reading of Hansel and Gretel proves what a genius Wes was. Horror and films in general are in debt to his storytelling. I enjoy Wes Craven's New Nightmare more than the next movie, but considering its overall legacy and how it helps propel the legend of Freddy Krueger, I will go with A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, The Dream Warriors. When I was 15 and started studying films to become a filmmaker, I realized how great this movie is. Nothing is wasted. It is very focused on its delivery. Everything it does is intentional. With Wes Craven behind the story, Frank Darabont writing the main screenplay, and future A-list director Chuck Russell behind the camera, you have a winning combination. This was also before Freddy Krueger had gone full-on game show host, so there are genuine scares. I was 23 when I bought the DVD box set for the Elm Street series. It had been a few years since I had watched Part 3, and I was almost embarrassed by how many times I jumped in fear watching it again. Dream Warriors is my second favorite Elm Street movie because of the stellar story, fantastic cast, awesome kills, steady direction, and the scare factor. In first place is the OG, A Nightmare on Elm Street. Is Dream Master better looking? Yes. Does Dream Warriors have the better cast? Yes. So why am I putting A Nightmare on Elm Street in the first place? Because I love it. Like I keep saying, I grew up with Freddy Krueger, but it was when I was 10 years old that I really watched A Nightmare on Elm Street. And by watch, I mean for the first time, it was not just a Freddy movie. I saw what Wes Craven was doing, and I was caught in the story. I sat alone in my dark bedroom, watching a movie I had seen at least 6 times, but was immersed in it for once. I was caught up in how Wes lets the audience go along with Nancy as she solves the mystery of who is killing her friends. You get a sense of time passing, friends dwindling, and Nancy's urgency to solve this mystery. She realizes that her family is no help and that she is alone in this fight. She does not run from Freddy, she runs directly at him. It is a fantastic horror film that created two legends, one with Freddy and two with Nancy. It put Wes Craven on the map, turned Robert Englund into a star, launched a movie studio, and frankly, was the main reason I decided to be a movie director. I rank A Nightmare on Elm Street as my all-time favorite in the series. What order do you rank the Elm Street movies? Leave a comment below. Also, please check out my book, The Horror Club, available on Amazon. And until next time, don't be scared to be you.